Welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, the only show on Indian television where you, the MSME, get sent a stage to voice your opinions and thoughts. This is ETNA's special daily initiative to give MSMEs and entrepreneurs the opportunity to be front and center on every industry and area that matters to you. Tonight on the show, an influencer, two separate conversations. First up with Ibibo and later on the show with Kidzania. To stay tuned. Travel is a mass market product, yet highly personalized, and using technology along with personalization in the travel industry is Ibibo. I caught up with Ashish Kashyap. He's the founder and group CEO of Ibibo earlier. Take a listen. Ashish, thank you very much for speaking with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. Let me start by asking you to very briefly talk to our viewers about Ibibo and your growth.
Yeah, thank you for having me over. As you know, Ibibo is an online travel organization. With a core focus of not just solving the problems of travelers, but also solving problems of lots of micro entrepreneurs and small and medium enterprises who supply accommodation services, bus services, and taxi services. Ibibo was born out of an incubator back in 2007. And our consumer brand, Go Ibibo, was a result of this platform, which became the largest hotels aggregator in the country. During our journey, we also acquired a popular bus ticketing brand called Red Bus, and we've also expanded that business to multiple global markets comprising Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia, Peru, and Colombia. Our journey, took new heights where we announced a merger with another competitor of ours called Make My Trip, and we closed that transaction in January earlier this year.
Okay, I want to talk about that merger with Make My Trip. Talk to viewers about what the experience was like, and equally important, talk to them about how you ensure that when two companies are merging, you're able to handle the people transition smoothly.
Firstly, one shouldn't undermine the intensity of the merger activity. So from our strategy point of view, number one, we have continued to keep and focus and build out our independent brands, which is Go Ibibo, Red Bus, and Make My Trip. On the other hand, there are many areas where we have executed integration and we have seen the benefits, and those benefits have been articulated to a large number of people. I think the key lessons from my side is that culture and identity should not be undermined. I think these are very, very sensitive topics. The number two aspect in a journey like this is to essentially over communicate with people on how one is executing the integration piece. The third is a lot of pieces need to evolve with people coming together, and some of the pieces is better kept independent than to over-integrate.
All right, fair enough. Let's talk GST, Ashish.
Yeah.
GST, of course, is disrupting the industry. How has your industry kept pace with that? Have you seen any impact, particularly in terms of maybe people now wanting to, take holidays, etc.? Any concern, any fear over GST, or has it been factored in?
I can speak for my business, and we look at this as a huge welcome change. We believe that GST will drive movement of offline to online, because I think there would be uniformity in pricing and taxation. We've seen a very large percentage of our tens of thousands of sellers on our platform to have submitted their GST numbers and also complied with GST. We've also seen that a lot of new sellers, accommodation providers have started digitizing their inventories. So in general, we see that this is a welcome change. Having said that, obviously it's a new phenomena, so there have been huge amount of teething troubles. I think even for us as a company, there was 30 days of rigorous work to make technology and backend and invoicing changes, which we have, the good news, we have executed the same. but we look at this absolutely as a positive change.
Okay. Are you happy with the kind of regulation that exists for the travel industry right now?
I think there is clarity of rules now, and there are multi aspects to it. One is financial and tax regulation. I believe that in that particular subcategory of regulation, there needs to be some bit of uniformity between international players and local players. On the other hand, other aspects like whose responsibility is the provision of service. I think there is now more and more clarity which has come in, and there is a bit of maturity which is happening in the ecosystem amongst both the inventory owners and platforms like ours and travelers on the other side.
Most reports suggest that apps in regional languages are perhaps going to be the next big growth drivers for your industry. I do know that you're big on mobile. Talk to our viewers about what specifically your strategy is when it comes to the mobile space and how they should perhaps be tapping that.
I mean, I think this is a very good question, because I feel that for the next 200 million online travelers in this country, we as platforms will need to go through a transformation in the way we produce our platforms and products and technologies. I think there are 2 or 3 things that I feel will happen. Number one is delivering a very lightweight mobile experience to customers. The second part is that the consumption and the bookability of our services should be possible in voice, through voice recognition, and NLP should be possible through symbols, and should be possible through artificial intelligence. And last but not the least, similarly, the post-purchase behavior, which means that what do I do when I reach a destination, or making a cancellation or amendment for my hotel booking. All of that should be made possible in a trivial manner for customers, either through voice, and when I say voice, this is really natural language processing and artificial intelligence, through symbols, and through even regional languages.
Okay, my last 2 questions to you, Ashish, and first I want to talk about the funding. Funding for any entrepreneur, of course, is the most critical thing when it comes to expansion or growth or just sustaining the business. Your own experience when it comes to fundraising, considering you've been associated so closely with so many different companies.
Yeah, I think in general, my sense on this topic is that if you are solving a real problem for end customer and the execution of that solution is flawless and super simple, then the funding will chase you as a platform. So I think that's really what I've seen. Of course, there are ups and downs in industries. My personal view is that getting capitalized during the downtime is even better, because there is less chaos. So in general, entrepreneurs should focus on execution, and solution of the problem should be delivered in a super simple manner, and the funding and capital will follow.
Yeah, so my last question to you, Ashish, you've started several businesses, a few of which have gone on to being acquired by much larger brands. As a serial entrepreneur, your one piece of advice for the viewers of our show about what perhaps it takes to be an entrepreneur, that one quality that you think they must have.
I think for not being fearful of failure is a very important thing.
All right, Ashish, thank you very much for speaking with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. Time for a break. When we come back on our second influencer tonight, a chat with Kidzania. Just stay tuned. Welcome back with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow, and tonight on our second influencer conversation, an interview that I did with Kidzania earlier. Reports suggest that a person picks her or his profession subconsciously, though, while still a child. Growing that into a science is Kidzania, the place where children learn by trying out for themselves different professions. I caught up with Ger Graus, he's the Director of Education at Kidzania, to talk about how this model is picking up steam in India and his lessons for our MSME viewers. Take a look. Thank you very much for speaking with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. I want to start by talking about Kidzania. It's a very unique model where you look at the education space. You're a private company that works particularly in a country like India, in a space which is so important. So talk to us about the company.
The company was founded in Mexico in 1999 and its founder is still the current president, Javier Lopez Ancona. I suppose he was a very successful man himself who never grew up and essentially created in Mexico City a city for children. Sure. Trying to make that as real as possible, which is where the brands come in, and trying to make it as exciting as possible, which is where the children's independence comes in. So at Kidzania, grown-ups are there to be seen and not heard, which feels to me right. And the model proved successful, and gradually over the last 18 or so years, we now have 24 Kidzanias globally, with another 16 or so in the pipeline, including the USA and South Africa. And 68 million children later, it's still going strong and still fills the space of children's aspirations, of children finding out for themselves rather than being taught. And from a school's perspective, it fills the place of connecting the real world with what is taught in the classroom.
Okay, so you were talking about filling a space. In India, what is that space that you see yourself filling? What is the model that in India, and is this different from what you're doing globally? How do you see the Indian market essentially is what I'm trying to understand.
I think first and foremost, every market is unique. Okay. And so therefore the Indian market will be unique. And actually within the Indian market, there will be differences between Delhi, Kidzania Delhi and Kidzania Mumbai, sure. Yeah? Because locality matters. The framework, which is what essentially the franchise is, allows for that local colouring in, if you wish. The space it fills is a space that is becoming, in India as well as everywhere else, is becoming increasingly important. Because increasingly what we find is that what we define as education has actually been redefined as schooling. So perhaps slightly controversially, I might say that in school, children don't learn as much as they are being taught. That then means that certain skills and skill sectors are applied less or not at all. For example, finding out for yourself. You may, the metaphor of falling over and learning to stand up. Grit, resilience, confidence. Those bits come from learning and experience-based learning, and that's the space where we sit, and not uniquely sit, but in terms of that futures education and futures awareness, we are unique.
So how does a model like yours fit in with the formal education system? Does it necessarily always need to be outside? How do you see yourself working more closely with formal education?
I think we work closely with formal education, and we do in India. We've had two head teachers conferences, one in Mumbai, one in Delhi. They were incredibly well attended. The conversations have been brilliant. I personally think that we are, if you wish, if you think of education as a science, then we are the appliance of that science. So what do schools do? Schools teach children, enable children to learn to a predetermined curriculum in a predetermined time and a predetermined space. What experiences like Kidzania do is they answer why questions. So the child who studies English at school produces a newspaper front page at Kidzania, or reads the news, or is a journalist. So it provides an element of purpose and reality, which perhaps in the past had existed more than it does now. And strangely, our children need that connect with reality more and more. One, because that world out there is ever changing. And secondly, that world out there now also includes that so-called virtual world. So in a sense, their world is bigger, yet their schooling experience is narrow. If you don't connect those, you miss out.
Okay, so I will discuss technology, but I want to go back to what I was asking you earlier about the Indian market. What's the kind of opportunity you're looking to tap here?
Now, I'm the Global Director of Education. The opportunity I look to tap is to be there for every child and to provide an experience for every child that is worthwhile and makes that child's life better, slightly better. Children can only aspire to what they know exists, i.e., if you are brought up in a home without books, it is highly unlikely that you will aspire to be a librarian. It is our job as Kidzania India and Kidzania globally, but in Kidzania India to the Indian context, is to open windows, to open doors, to twitch curtains, and to show children horizons, and to let them experience those horizons, so that, going back to the example, that the child who has no books at home, but experiences them perhaps at Kidzania, finds another route to want to become a librarian.
You said something very interesting about costing. Now, particularly for a developing market like ours, education and quality education comes at a cost. How do you ensure that with the model that you have, you're able to reach every child, like you said?
We work in partnership with organizations and non-government organizations. We work in partnership with, and I go back to that honesty bit, we don't have all the answers. But for example, we've just finished a meeting with Teach for India. They have a significant number of answers. The challenge we have is how can we play our own part in providing the best possible education for those children who are currently the furthest removed from that. Sure. So there are moral issues around that, but there are very pragmatic ones. So we will make that happen as best as we can.
Okay. That also then calls into question the role of the government, particularly here in a market like this. What role does the government play? And in your opinion, what role should the government play in education?
The government for me is any government. Ought to be the investor in education. It is the government is to all intents and purposes the caretaker of the well-being of the country. The well-being of the country will, going back to your point about cost, the well-being of the country needs investment, and that the core of that investment in some shape or form ought to come from government.
Okay. There's a very interesting survey that had come out by an industry body a short while ago, where they said that despite having a huge number of working professionals who are entering the market every year here in India, only about 20–25% have the requisite skill sets. Another report I was reading said that kids very subconsciously pick their professions early on in life, whether we realize it or not. How are you as a model then able to sort of fill that gap? How are you able to plug that gap?
Because there are two questions in there, and both of those are very, very important. First of all, we need to look very carefully at what our education system is and does, and secondly, how schools do it. It might be a slightly black and white view that I present, but that's quite deliberate. I would argue that in many countries, our education system is an education system of the past. I said to my daughter fairly recently, the only reason you've got 6 weeks holiday in England is because apparently you need to help me in the field harvest. So systematically, our system is no longer a system for today, let alone tomorrow. And we really need to begin to ask ourselves questions about, for example, the role of the teacher and who the teachers are. Every child in a society is everybody's responsibility. I'm a teacher. I will never be a careers teacher because, in a sense, all I've done all my life is gone to school, as a child and as a grown-up. I'm also, as a teacher, a good project manager. So instead of teaching careers education, for example, should I not project manage it and bring the expertise in from outside so that the children have a direct connect with that? So that's the first point. The second one is about children choosing early. We've done global research. We will continue that research into India. We've done global research onto what activities children choose as their first activity when they come to Kidzania, and then we've analyzed that data against national statistics. At the age of 4, all stereotypes are set.
Okay, that early on.
All of them. Dramatically. Not just in one country, in a number of countries. There is little change between the age of 4 and the age of 14. And disturbingly, girls, regardless of their background, choose activities below their age range, and boys choose activity above. There is our challenge. There is the challenge that we need to take on. So can somebody please, on a postcard, can somebody please tell me why, if these are the findings, do we wait in our education system for another 10 years before we start to talk to our children about their futures? So it needs to have a dramatic change, and the private sector and those who employ need to become part of the teaching profession of the future.
Okay. So speaking of teachers, do you think there is enough understanding of the quality of teachers who are coming into our teaching institutes, into organizations and institutions, not just in India but across the world?
I think it's always a mixed feast, but by and large, and I travel extensively, I have a great deal of respect for the quality of the teachers that we have. I think there are two issues that I would like to raise, so well done to them. The two issues I'd like to raise with that, I think the first one is teachers can only be as good as the structure within they operate will allow them to be. Finance is an issue. Narrow curricula is another issue. And the further issue is the unreasonable, often, expectations that society has of teachers. Schools increasingly are expected to be the provider of all solutions, which are, those responsibilities are often abdicated by others. So you take into that complex framework, I think our teachers do a brilliant job. Could some of them do better? Of course.
Okay, so through our show, I'd like for you to talk to our viewers about the business opportunities for small businesses perhaps. Given your model, given the education system in India, what do you think the opportunities are? How do you think they can tap those opportunities?
I think that there are a number of opportunities, aren't there? There are easy, direct opportunities that people in business may want to engage with us here as an industry partner. And that's easy enough. Pick up the phone, ring us, and we'll have the dialogue. I think educationally, more importantly, business and business organizations may wish to speak to us, and indeed to others, about a direct involvement in the education of their future workforce. Every year, wherever I am in the world, every year I hear when the examinations come out, well, the kids have done very well in their exams, but they're not quite what we're looking for. My answer is, put up or shut up. Come off the fence, tell us what you need, and help us provide what you need, and we will, together, deliver what you want.
Okay, so you think that's the business opportunity. I want to, my final question to you. What are the next few years looking like for you in India, and where do you see yourself? What sort of changes, perhaps anything that you can talk about to us?
I think I'm extraordinary. This is my first visit to India, so where do I see myself on a personal level in the next few years? Coming back to India quite a lot. I've thoroughly enjoyed being here. It's been an immense privilege. Where do I see us organizationally go? I think from strength to strength, and I don't mean that in a pure balance sheet kind of way, but in terms of in making differences to children's lives in partnership with others. It's interesting, isn't it? I think the answer is an easy one. I quite like simple answers. Wherever I've been, including here today, and I show grown-ups round Kidzania, the answer I get, the reaction I always get, 100%, whether it's Mexico, London, Kuwait, or indeed India, is I wish this had been around when I was a child.
Absolutely. That was my first thought walking through.
I would like to be back in India at some point and speak to somebody who says, I'm so glad that was around when I was a child.
Thank you very much for speaking with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Completely out of time on this episode of Leaders of Tomorrow. If you have any feedback for us, email us at leadersoftomorrow@timesgroup.com. Tweet at me personally at Sananda_J or LOT_ET now. Our Facebook page is Leaders of Tomorrow on ET now. You can also call us on that number you see on your screens. Thanks very much for watching. Have a good night.